I actually wrote a much longer bio than I normally do so that I can minimize time on myself and maximize time on you all. So I'm not going to do a lot about my background or anything like that. I really want to get us into this conversation as quickly as possible. But I will say that I've spent probably about 25 years guiding companies, teams from within and externally through high innovation and change environments. And I love it. And so a lot of this philosophy has been built over the years, and we're in extraordinary times. And so this is really a dialogue and sharing about what you're doing and then some techniques. So really quickly, we're going to do a little bit for us, which is minding our mind. Then we're going to talk about what I call the gap between what was and where we are. And then think about some fun techniques that you can bring to your teams, but also use for yourself. And then we're going to do Q&A. So minding our mind. How long have you been sitting in front of your computer today? I'm just in the morning and I've already been in front of my computer for 4 hours. So what we would do before we begin is just do a little moment. I call it a count to 4 so that we can just clean out some space mentally to go where we're going to go. Super simple. So we can all just sit back in our chair. Oh my gosh. And close your eyes gently. And what we're going to do is a 4 count. And we're going to take a deep breath in, and on the count of 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as we breathe out, 4, 3, 2, 1, just imagine that you're just cleaning out everything that you don't need. So breathe in gently right now. Just get that out all morning. Now gently open your eyes, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a little stretch. We're going to put our shoulders up to our ears. Oh my gosh. Oh, that computer shoulder. And then roll your shoulders back. Oh my gosh. And then bring them down. And then we're going to turn to the left. Oh, and I'm going to hear some back cracking. And then we're going to turn to the right. I'm going to hear more back cracking. Oh my goodness, that was my neck. Shake a little bit. All right, let's start. So I don't know if any of you have had a chance to look at any of the other classes, but I have just enjoyed them. I thought those were extraordinary. Every time I watch them, I learn. Some of them have prompts, some of them don't. I started my career in advertising, and so I do a lot of visuals as well as talking. The reason I do that is I spent years, and this is really thinking about the different minds, the ways that people absorb information. So for years when I was running creative and design groups, I'd like stand up there and do talkie, the traditional thing. And I had this moment where one of the designers finally said, I finally understood what you were talking about. I'm like, okay, describe to me what was different. He said, well, you went up to the whiteboard and you actually drew me a picture. It's like, oh, okay. So a lot of when we're moving through these times, we tend to want to be very short. Here's what it is. And we tend to do a lot of dialogue. What's super important is to remember that especially in stress situations, everyone's brain absorbs information differently. And so having a conversation, words and pictures becomes exponentially more important to bring your whole team along. The picture part is really interesting. We tend to do slides with words, but we don't do pictures. And it's so fascinating to see how how much faster some brains process the image more than they do the words of the voice. So that's why we do this. When I talk about the gap, what I'm talking about is the gap between thinking, feeling, acting, and spending, because we're talking about business and teamwork here. What was the norm and what is the new? So, as you'll learn if you go and look at some of the videos, what happens is when we're in extreme stress situations, our brains normally, in that fear moment, go back to doing more of what we know harder. So the challenge is, how do we move and recognize that gap? Like really cognitively internalize that gap, but do it as a team. So here's the was, right? So this was a normal change management model. This is a normal change management model. There's an event. We're all familiar with this. There's that cycle of chaos. I call this the Magnificent Seven. Different people do this at different times until finally you swoop out and you start to move into consideration and experiment, deciding and acting, and integrating. And every change model that you see, there are probably about 8 or 9 really famous ones, actually move through this with differing definitions on differing lines, but it's this movement. We also are familiar with this, which is the regular top-down model. So we have this moment, we have a control set, and then what we do is we go into huddle and we try and reduce the variance. We try and reduce the variance. So we move up into that top level cycle, we pull in all the information, we strategize in a closed room, we include others as needed, we define things, and then we push them out. Right? That's a traditional model. What about when things are not norm around you and you're changing as well? Okay, this is what I call, we're in a moment of three-dimensional change. We're in a moment of three-dimensional change. So not only are we in the micro of individual owners, managers, contributors, your customers, customers, and your families all in the same situation. Regardless of attitude, we just have this reality that we're in. We also have the macro. So whole industry, our government systems, our institutions, the general marketplace, our countries, and the monetary systems are also in flux. So if we think about a normal chessboard where we're moving pieces and we're controlling the change factors, we're now in a three-dimensional moment. So what I adopted, and by the way, I designed this back when digital was coming in. So a lot of my job was to come into brick and mortar businesses and help them figure out, oh my God, the whole world around me is changing. They're all converting. My industry has said we're all going digital, and I've got a brick and mortar business. What is this thing called the internet? So what I developed was this. Hashtag WTM. It's memorable because we also feel WTF. And it's a mental model, which is go wide for wisdom, track regularly, and mind the gap. So what does that mean? Wide for wisdom. Include a broader set of constituents. A broader set of constituents. Your customers are actually facing exactly what you are. We forget that. This is an extraordinary moment and our customers are doing what we are. So engage them, your team, and also external advisors. This is a moment in time where everyone has at least a shared understanding. So might you collaborate and acknowledge these stages that you're all going through? And we'll do an exercise to talk about how we might do that regularly. So if we think about this, we also want to track. So we're going to go wide for wisdom. And then what we're going to do is go move that into our internal team and start to collaborate, assess, refine, and align with a broader team so that they are acting, but they're acting to build aggregated information and learning in time with the change around you. It is impossible for an elite group of people to be able to track the volume of changes that are happening. So leverage your external team to inform your internal team. And I don't just mean your leadership team. This is when you are anxious, you're going to do stuff. And so what's happening is there's a team full of anxiety who are acting harder in maybe ways that might be diminishing your effectiveness unwittingly. They're just trying to do their job, but what their job might not be what it should be anymore. So by engaging them in some of these assessment activities, you can also get them to be smarter about their actions as well. And then finally, as you deploy, what you want to be doing is you want to give them a perspective. So I just had this lovely conversation with a manager this morning. And she said, we came out last month really high, and we're all excited, we're energized. And she said, yesterday we all hit that bottom where we're like, and now what do we do? Right? So we moved into action, did a bunch of stuff, cleaned a bunch of things, and now we're like, what's happening? And now we're dropping, right? And I said, oh, okay. It's a cycle, and it's not a one and done. The world today, it was never a one and done. When we moved into digital, we stopped being in a one and done. But even now, it's even more. So what we want to do is constantly integrate this into your culture, into your mentality. The changes, leverage the broader group, really include and bring people into that problem solving. How do you do that in a way that is acknowledging EQ but not making chaos, right? That's always a fear, like, oh my God, this is gonna be so time consuming. How do we do this? How do we keep track of it? And then we have to set up systems. There's actually a fairly efficient way to do this to get everyone moving and focused on next. So the big question is, how do we collaborate more without creating chaos? So what we're going to do is a little bit of play. And hopefully each of you has a little piece of paper and a pen. You're going to have to sketch a little bit. And then once we go through 3 really short exercises, what we'll do is break out into groups, and you can reflect and exchange some of your ahas. Hopefully we'll have some. Okay, so these are small asks that benefit all, right? So what we want to do is orient the whole team, not towards normalcy, but towards new, and engage them in the discovery of the direction that you want to be going in. But do it in a way that is purposeful, gives you more informed choices, and are actionable. So I do this with sprints. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 little sprints, and then we'll pause and we'll talk about some insight work, and then you can break out into groups. But these 3 sprints done regularly, you can do this as an individual, or you can pop it online and do them as fun little things that broad teams can do. There's so many surveying tools out there, from Google to SurveyMonkey, that you can use, and the aggregated data will astonish you. I have found some extraordinary insights out of, you know, some quiet little person in the corner who never speaks up. And when you do these kinds of things, they're now engaged, and sometimes they're just jewels that help you unlock things for your business, for your team, and for you as an individual. So first brainstorm, you're going to put on a sheet of paper your brainstorm and then force rank 1 to 7. And what you're going to do is spend 3 minutes only. I'll give you 1.5 moments to just brainstorm all the things that are important to you or your business. You can do this as an individual, or you can do this as for your company. And then I'm going to give you another 1.5 minutes to force rank. And you're going to have a side sheet. So actually you need 2 sheets of paper. And there's going to be a lot of, I'm going to call it mental friction that is going to say, oh, I can't write that down. Write them on a separate piece of paper because you just don't need it right now. You only got 3 minutes. So before I start the 3-minute time clock, are there any questions? There's no right or wrong way to do this, just so you know. This is your way. This is just play. Just play. Okay, so I'm going to start the timer. You've got 3 minutes starting now, and I'll give you the 1.5 mark. Go. So all you're doing is brainstorming. No right or wrong answer. If you find yourself stuck, just write why you're stuck on the side of another sheet. Just keep going. And you're at the halfway mark. So if you'd like, start to move over and force rank. So start to move over the things that you've brainstormed into a force ranked. And it's just today. Trust your gut. Don't overthink this. Force rank. Follow your gut. That's all we're doing today. Naps might be at the top. I don't know. Just and we're done. So now we're going to leap to the next sprint. We call these sprints. We're just going to do a little gut check. So, how are you doing? 1 is low, 5 is high. What you're going to do is, and these are just, you can make these up at another time. This is just an example. These are just little sprints that you can do with team to just do a regular check-in beyond what you're intellectualizing into gut, right? So How are we doing? Your old norm might have been a 2, and now something's changed and risen. So now everyone is feeling banded together, and that's now a 3, right? So you've done a gut check on what is important. Now think about how you take that internalization and how you're feeling now and what was. And then one thing that might move that number up to be a 4. So if culture was a 2, it's now a 3 because you banded together. What are some things that you might do to make that a 4 or 5? Are there things that you can do for your business culture that might just bump that up even more? So you've got another 3 minutes. You're going to do just a gut check. What is the numbers for what used to be our old state? So it was culture, competitive, how we were doing in our competitive market. How is our business operations? How effective were we as functional units? What was how was our business vision? Was it clear? And what is our confidence in management? And that can be leader. You can make up your own.
Can I ask? Oh,
sure. Yeah.
What is the scale of the numbers? Like, is it?
1 is low feeling about culture. 5 is high.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And Janis, just a question. We could also use the brainstorming list of things that are important to us right now, right? From the previous exercise.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So do we want to pause and talk about some of the things that you can imagine doing a regular tap to your teams to just audit, right? So this is really about coming back and saying, how are we feeling about this now? How are we feeling about this now? What is changing? Because if everything around us is changing, this is going to be moving. So are there any ideas about other things other than these that other people might also think about?
I think one thing that stood out for me, because I work much more online, is regular check-ins. So I get, like, usually you go to the restroom or you go to grab a coffee or something like that, and you just like run into somebody else. But right now, it is simply not happening.
Yeah.
So with that, I rarely know what other people are working on or where they are. So improving that could be like one thing. I think the old norm was probably a 5. The new norm is probably a 1, because everybody is they have like children around and like other things to focus on while they're at home. So it's actually a little harder. And doing that
it might be teamwork, right? Like, or companionship, camaraderie, right? Those are things that we miss is and mental clarity. I mean, I know I get fatigue where before I didn't get fatigue. So those might be ideas that you might put up there. How are you feeling, right? So this is a gut check. So why don't we take 3 minutes, and you can write your own list and then do old norm, and new now. And then what small thing might you do that would move the level of improvement you're feeling up from now? So starting now. And by the way, this is a dialogue. So if you have other questions, just ask. So you got about a minute left. You want to go back and also look at what you did before and see if anything's changed now that you've done this. So we're going to leap to the next idea. And I have been working with a number of companies that I'm so excited about how they're rethinking their assets. How they're rethinking their assets. And oftentimes we ignore some of the more organic, non-tangible elements of our company or our business or ourselves. And don't understand them as part of our wealth. We only look at the monetary, or we only look at external status. And so really rethinking about, okay, in the norm, this might have been our assets in regular industry. But, might there be some new assets that are rising to the top? Or might there be things that were not recognized as real services or products that with a little bit of adjustment, maybe your company has really powerful networking skills and that's been underestimated. Might you now take that and turn that into a service? So what are the unseen, unrecognized, unheralded assets that you might transform into something being really powerful? And it's actually taken from a company that I worked with, which took their hospitality products and they begun to transform them into teaching hospitality, hotels and everything to move towards a healthcare offering, which is extraordinary, right? It's sort of like, okay, we got a bunch of Lego on the table. We used to only have a building. What can we rebuild with that? It's really rethinking, what do I have and how I reuse this? So you got 3 minutes for this exercise. Just brainstorm for, minute and a half on norm, and then brainstorm on what are some new ways that I might reuse or bring to the surface assets that I have today. So 3 minutes, and I'll give you the 1.5 time. How might you use skills, superpowers, hidden gems in a new way in this new? And we're at time. I don't know about you all, but I think the brain is such a funny thing, our perception of time. And so when you have a timer, um, time can either feel really short or it can feel really long, right? And so sometimes when you're in this and you're in the flow, time sort of floats away and it feels like that was, more than enough. And sometimes 3 minutes, we tend to think about 3 minutes as like, not enough. But really, all you need to do is tap. We tend to make these like, oh, so it take us hours to get this together. It's really literally you pop a timer on. We know what the right answer is. Trust your gut and just watch how it evolves and look for patterns. I've actually done this particular exercise with a big company, a big corporation. And the responses here were extraordinary because when you ask the broadest set of your employees, what is our wealth? Right? Go beyond what are the things that are special about us? Really uncorks and unlocks, and really, like, oh, I never thought about that. There's a lot of things in the norm that we take for granted that uplift some of the external things that we get shiny compliments for. And in the new, those become the anchor that really helps solidify and hold the business forward that it's going to need for the next couple of years. So finally, let me just pause before we do this another 3-minute exercise. Are there any questions about any of the other things that we've done? Okay, so this is a building process. So now you've done 3 data gathering exercises. What you're going to do is just a little bit of analysis. So you're going to ask yourself 2 questions. What untapped assets can be shifted to our new priorities? So now you've thought about, oh, these are things. Now how can we now move those untapped assets to support their new priorities? And then 2, is our company or team in the new direction or are they in the old? And how might you begin to shift that, right? So you've got 3 minutes for this, a minute and a half to answer question 1, and then a minute and a half to answer question 2, and then we're going to do breakouts or Q&A. Okay. So starting now, you have 3 minutes. You got about a minute and a half, so if you finish question 1, maybe go to question 2. If there are other things that are popping up, write them down. This is a really beautiful way to sort of poke your brain and mine some ideas. So we're at time. If anyone wants a little more time, if you're coming up with jewels and in the flow. So Ingo, now do you want to open it up for questions and discoveries or do breakouts? I mean, we have a fairly nice, discrete, small group. So if you just want to leave it with this group, I'm okay
Yeah,
with
sure.
that.
Like if you want, I'm happy to keep it to this group. It's 14 people right now.
Yeah, it's a
So let's,
nice
if you
switch.
want, switch to the gallery mode, which is above or show grid video. So if you look at Janis' video in the top right or above the video, there is this show grid video button, which is a couple of gray squares basically. And let's press that so we can see each other and have a conversation about what we found and how the exercise went.
And first, I think we should start with, were there any questions about any of the 3D minding? By the way, I talk about this as not change management, but rather change minding. So what happens is there is management, which is very, if we think about it from an organizational brain, it is really our, front rationalizing and critical brain. Minding is really about also including emotional gut checks so that what you're able to do is include the both and get a sensibility of where the shifts are happening and finding rhythms and patterns. So I'd love to open this up and, if there are any questions about this, comments, yes, no, what is everyone engaging with their teams? What are some of the challenges?
I'm happy to break the ice here because I had a...
Hi, Fanny.
Oh, Fanny, please.
Hi. Oh no, I was going to say I thought this was excellent, and I had not thought about the team and the new and the old norm and put it in those terms. So it was incredibly helpful. The area that I struggled the most with was the new wealth exercise, like where to find the new wealth when you have, a small company that is so particular. I don't know. This is all the others I thought were right on, and it was very easy to sort of find the nuggets of hope there. But this is the one that I struggled the most with.
Yeah. Were there any other places that people struggled? Yeah.
I just want to build on Fanny's because I had a similar, I realized that I was so focused on my old way of seeing value that it kind of biased me to think about the things that I already know. It was really hard to list these things that don't feel very valuable, that I take for granted. So that was my challenge that I had, doing this exercise. But for me, it was bringing it home with this question that you ask about how could you use the assets that you have against the challenges that you experience. And I think there, it started to click, and I started to make a little bit of a leap. But before that, it was challenging.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Kathy. So I kind of got the sense that from the people I know, right, they would need to do the first idea number 1 as a regular practice for them to get to idea 2 and 3. Some sort of reflect. And of course, that takes time to introduce. And I think it could be super powerful, this whole session. But I don't think people could take idea 1 and go very well to idea 2 and 3 the way we've done it, because we know why we're here. But I really think people would need to have taken idea 1 for maybe 2 weeks, right? 5 days out of 2 weeks of a work session, and just kind of track it and then come with that. And then you ask them the question, how are you doing today? but they have to get in the practice of thinking about how am I doing? Because for the language for me between idea 1 and idea 2 was so different in terms of what I was writing that I'm not sure that everyone would make that leap with. I'm working I work overseas where not everyone speaks English.
Yeah.
And and so not just losing English, but just like that very didactic method of teaching would be very hard to jump without some sort of preparatory anticipatory set if we talk about teaching. Yeah.
And I can talk about that if you're interested in what I've discovered. So I actually I have two things. So I have a consultancy that I work with companies, and then I actually have a business that I built, which is around this method. And it's actually designed around what we know about brain science today, which is engaging people in this is not the norm. And sometimes it feels uncomfortable. So instead of over describing it and getting them ready, I drop people into it, and it's only 3 minutes. You can even do it for less. But the key is you have to deliver on why they did it later. And then people are like, oh, right. So you could do this trio. They're not going to get it right. There's no right or wrong. And so we're so attached to doing it correctly. So it's really about getting people into the cadence. So you might have what we normally would have considered random garbage in the first couple of ones. But once you deliver the, oh, this is what we learned, then people go back at it. The reason you do this in the beginning is really so that you managing teams and doing the business are really also getting a sense of how in touch people are with their authentic intelligence. That's also another set of learning where the numbers become more and more in this cadence, and you begin to see the patterns. So you have a feeling that they're disattached. And so by running them through this practice and then showing them how as a group there was this pattern, then they're beginning like, oh, okay, we have some agreement around these 3 places. Great. Now you're going to do it again the next week. Does that make sense? So it's really about getting people comfortable with speaking just what they're feeling right now instead of thinking about it. And again, for businesses and executives, this isn't about a critique. This is really about how are people feeling, right? Because we have so much intellectual information, and we have, statisticians, and we have, all of sort of market movement and all of this. This is just how are we all feeling about this? Because it could be that this is how you begin to also see gaps. It could be that you run your company in a strata. And so there's a group of people up above, right? The leaders who are like, we're doing good. We're a 4 or 5, right? And then you have the rest of the company and they're at a 1 or 2. That's a signal. That's a signal. And it's not a bad people. It's like, oh, these are the people we're caring for. This is our asset. This is our wealth. What might we do to move that forward? This is really like, got all the intellectual stuff. Now let's just check our gut. We don't have a quantitative way to do that today. So this is almost like taking qualitative stuff and moving it into a quantitative format where you can regularly watch the evolution and look for patterns.
So thank you for responding to that. So I just have then a question on idea 2.
Yeah.
Are those categories co-created with the client, or are they ones you find standard and then you give people the option of looking at them and saying, do you want to add anything else? I'm just curious.
I think it would be, for me, when you send this out to clients to participate, what you want to know is really the outcomes of this are how are you being perceived, and what are some things that you wouldn't normally be able to get a tap on? right? Putting a number is a much easier thing than actually writing an essay for you, right? So this is a really nice way to tap, like, oh, they're seeing behind the wall, or, oh, they're sensing this particular break. We need to figure that out and have dialogue with them. And I will show you this one fun little case study. So this is a group that I started doing this kind of technique with them pre-pandemic. They were doing a product launch, and they were basically doing a whole pivot for their company. And so what was super interesting is what happened is they accelerated their engagement, and now they're doing something that they call community marketing. So they're co-creating their new product with their customers, which is not what they would have done before. But now they're sort of like, hey, we're all in this together. Like, how can we do this? And so they're now bringing in the customers to evolve and shift, kind of recognizing that we're in this new place. We have this opportunity. We have these assets. We're now dedicated to these other things. And they also broke down a lot of walls. So normally they had these vertical channels within their company. They actually brought stakeholders from across the company together with clients. So instead of only having some interface, they brought everyone together to co-create what they're going to be doing. So that's how they're particularly using this system.
I have another question. So I love that case study. And in terms of keeping the pulse of the team, so what's the best way to do that? Do you send surveys, polls? How often is good? What do you recommend?
My gut today says I would do these before and after big sort of activity, right? So so in the case of what I was just describing, when you have a purpose and you're really energized, that's probably not exactly the right time you want to do this, right? What you want to do it is right after that, because you know what's going to happen is it's going to drop. In this particular case, very familiar story, I think, to all of us. This team was focused on delivering a big pitch to a client. So they're all energized for 2 weeks, really up. Everyone had a purpose. They were super excited. They sent it off and wah, 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 right? So normally they're used to the norm cycle where it's like they get feedback in 3 days. They're off and running, and at least they wanted it or they didn't. Guess what? On the other side, customers are also trying to scramble, right? Remember, in a three-dimensional space. And so the normal time that might have been 3 days is now maybe 3 weeks. And so that's when you want to be like, how you feeling before 2 weeks later? How you feeling, right? So Fanny, I would encourage doing this in lots of fun ways. It doesn't have to be a chart. It could be, I've gotten obsessed with, what is that board? Miro. So Miro is a virtual post-it board. So it could be that everyone writes a number and they all go up to the board and they do it together. There are lots of fun little ways that you can do these. And again, the reason I put timers on this is to show people so they don't be like, oh, it takes so long, right? It's just like, it's a snappy, fun thing. Set the timer and get people going, and that's a little bit of energy.
I think that was my keyword, Janis. Thank you so much, because we just spent an hour, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, time really flew by. So thank you so much, Janis. I have made tons of notes, and I really enjoyed it because you gave me a lot of opportunity to work alongside with you. So thank you for that. Also, thank you to all of you who joined us here today for this hour. And I will send out a follow-up email, as always, with a link to the presentation as well as with Janis' email address. She will be CC. So if you have further questions, ideas, recommendations, feel free to respond to her. With that, I hope to see some of you tomorrow for our liminal coffee, if you want to join us. If not, I hope to see you for one of the upcoming sessions that will continue next week, Tuesday. We always have sessions like these on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always at the same time. So if you want to join again, I'm looking forward to see you.